Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And this morning I am going to show you the absolute easiest way that I know of to plan your garden. Now I've been planting gardens for a very long time. What I usually do is I usually work out the basics and then confer with Henry on, have I missed anything? Does he have any better ideas? That sort of thing. And generally speaking, we work it out and we plant. But when you're new at this, how do you decide the timing of your garden? Now, what I mean by that is, if you look at seed containers, okay, these are celosias, which is a nice flower from Haas Tools, and it says when to plant after last frost, the planting depth, the seed spacing, the row spacing, and days to maturity, 90 days. Well, that may sound pretty straightforward, and for these guys, it is pretty straightforward. But it's not always straightforward for every type of plant. Now, first thing you need to figure out is your last frost date. If you go to the internet and Google last frost date, there's a couple of websites that will come up that will tell you what your last frost date is. That's important because you need to be timing when you put things in. Now, if you're just a very casual gardener, if you're a gardener who says, oh, it's June now, and I'm going to grab a couple of plants down at the local garden center and toss them in, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to be a little more serious, if you're trying to figure out how to maximize your grow time during the summer, spring, summer, fall actually, and for us sometimes the winter too, you need to know how long things are going to take, when your first frost is, when your last frost is, that sort of stuff. What I recommend people do, and this may sound like a giant cheat, but sometimes it's even hard to remember all the different kinds of plants that you want to grow. So what I do is I send people to Johnny's Select Seeds. Now, I get nothing from Johnny, unless I pay for it. But I have been doing business with him for a long time. Have I ever gotten bad seeds from them? Yeah, but I've gotten bad seeds from every supplier out there at some time. You can use, free of charge, their seed starting date calculator. And all you do is you go to the website, and we'll put that information, it's just johnnyseeds.com. You go to the grower's library, and then you click on the seed planting schedule. You put in the date that, at least I haven't checked this year to see what they're doing, but you may have to answer a couple of simple questions there, like the frost-free date, your last frost-free date, and then click the button. And what it will do is it will give you a long list of veggies. And you can print the whole thing out, and that's what I do. So I print it out. Now, I've got a piece of paper, and I can sit there and start going through the list. Okay, artichokes. I am not going to do artichokes this year. I have tried them before here. They don't work well in our climate. I can't keep them alive for more than 2 years. Some other places, piece of cake. And if you love artichokes, there's nothing better than an artichoke that just came off a plant. Second one on this list, basil. Okay, it says the number of weeks to start seeds before setting out date is 6 weeks. And then it gives you the actual date of when to start inside. And then when to set it out relative to the frost-free date. Some of, like in this case, for the basil, it says set it out a week after your normal frost-free date in the spring. Okay? And it has a suggested when you can set it out date based on the frost-free date that you gave them. It doesn't get any easier than that. What I like about this list is that sometimes I will forget something that I had planned to grow. And this is not probably, I mean, there's lots of things on here I don't like or wouldn't grow, or they don't grow in my climate particularly. But it's got a lot of very practical stuff. Now, where it really comes in handy is when you're talking about things like tomatoes and peppers and other plants that you know you need to start ahead. Now, you don't have to start ahead. You can just buy them at a garden center. But to be honest, sometimes they don't have them at the garden center. Most important, they may not have the varieties that you want. Now, if you're just a casual grower and you say, well, I want something that produces a good homegrown tomato, and I'm just going to toss it in a pot, and I don't really care what variety it is, I know it's going to be delicious, or at least better than what I can get in the grocery store, no problem. That's fine. It's still kind of nice to know when you should put it in. You can't always rely on your garden centers. Now, if you get a good garden center where you can ask questions, fine. But if you're using a big box store, I hate to say it, a lot of those people don't know which end of a shovel to use, much less any details about the plant. If it doesn't say it on that little stick that's stuck in the plant, they don't know it. That's not their area of specialization. They're just retail drones. They're just out there doing their job, selling stuff to people. And they may or may not know anything about gardening. If you go to a good quality garden center and ask them questions, most of the time they will have people there who are really gardeners who really can answer your questions. The reason I mention this is because it depends on where you live as to what your climate is doing. For instance, we are in growing zone 7B. That's what they say. But it's not just 7B. We have altitude issues in this area. We're less than 6,000 feet, but we're about, I think we're 5,280. I think that's what it is. If I go up to Williams or Flagstaff, you'll know we say up, it's because we are going up. They're higher altitude. That means they're a different grow zone than we are in. I can always get seedlings in Flagstaff. Okay, they'll be available later in the season, but they'll probably work here. If I go down to Chino Valley or Prescott Valley, and I buy seeds, not seeds, but seedlings down there, they're in a different grow zone than we are because a significant percentage of Chino is lower than we are, and Prescott varies tremendously depending on where you are. Basically, the area around Prescott is a bowl. So if you're in the bottom of that bowl, you're going to have a different grow zone than if you're up on one of the mountains that's around it. They expect you to know the answer to when you should plant your plants. This date calculator can save your bacon when it comes to things like that. And it can also help you to understand things. For instance, it says here, the number of weeks to start before setting out date for tomatoes is 6 to 8. This package of tomato seeds from Totally Tomatoes says that you will be getting tomatoes approximately 75 days from transplant. Okay. This package from Johnny's says 75 days. This package from Haas Tools says 70 days. Okay, is there a difference between what they say? Yeah, to be honest, this trial package, it was where you buy some tomatoes and you get one free. It says 75 days from transplant. Now, all these other things mean 75 days or 70 days, depending on the variety, from transplant, but they're not telling you that. What they're expecting you to do is know that you have to have started. So in this case, using this seed starting date calculator, it says that you want to start your seeds 6 to 8 weeks before you plan to transplant it. Now, if you're counting on throwing a seed in the ground and having tomatoes in 75 days, you're going to be very disillusioned because it's not going to happen. In 75 days, you should have tomatoes ready to transplant, but they're certainly not going to be producing tomatoes in large quantity. You might have some flowers on them at that time. You might even have some baby fruits. but you certainly will not have full-blown ripe tomatoes. So knowing, for instance, that tomatoes need to be planted, the seeds need to be started 6 to 8 weeks before you're ready to transplant, that's an important thing to know. Watermelon, on the other hand, only needs to be started, if you're starting them inside instead of direct sowing them, 3 to 4 weeks before transplant. Almost anything in the cucurbit family, which a watermelon is in the cucumber family, so it's your cucumbers, your squash, your melons, your pumpkins, most of those things grow very quickly. And if I were to scoot down this list here, it would say 3 to 4 weeks for all of those things, because in 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to have a good sized plant that's ready to go out. In 3 to 4 weeks, I have seen tomatoes take up to 21 days to sprout. And peppers can definitely take that long to sprout. So you really need to figure that in. Now, this chart will not tell you how long it takes for seeds to sprout. I would say, as a rough guesstimate, most things will be up in 2 weeks, but there will always be some seeds that come up early and some seeds that come up late. But if you're growing something like husk cherries or peppers, now you'll notice both of those are in the nightshade family. Nightshade family can be kind of fussy when it comes to how long seeds come to come up. It may take you quite a while. Now, how can you figure that part out? Well, if you go online and you look at something like a Johnny's, it will give you information about germination temperatures, and the reason they can't necessarily tell you exactly how quickly your seeds are going to come up is because of those germination temperatures. For instance, when I grow seeds, right now I start them in the grape room, and then at some point they get potted up, shifted out, or planted out, depending on what they are. I use a grow mat, a heat mat, underneath my seedlings, and that dramatically speeds up the amount of time it takes for seedlings to come up, for the seeds to germinate. There are seeds, and let me see if I can find that chart. I have a little cute chart that I meant to bring in here and I forgot. There it is. Okay, this is a perfect example of why a lot of companies, a lot of seed companies, won't mention how long it takes for a seed to come up. I don't remember what plant this was for, but it sounds like it could have easily been either tomato or pepper, probably a tomato. If the soil temperature is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, days to emergence, that means from the time you've planted your seed until the time you see that little teeny piece of green emerge from the ground, is 14. If the soil temperature is 68 degrees, the days to emergence is 8. If the soil temperature is 77 degrees, days to emergence is 6. If the soil temperature is 85 degrees, the days to emergence is 5. And if the soil temperature is 95 degrees, the days to emergence is 9. Now, whoa, that's a piece of information that's really important to pay attention to. What this is telling you is if the soil gets too warm, it will actually take longer for the seeds to germinate. In fact, in some cases, you will get a sort of, we call it a plant coma, but I'm trying to think what they actually call it. It's when the plant seed is temperature sensitive and it actually goes dormant. Lettuce is one of the plants that can do that. So say I had my soil temperature at 95 degrees and I tossed in those lettuce seeds, it's going to hate me. It may not come up at all. It may wait 6 months to come up. And I'm going to think by that time that I'm not going to get those lettuce seeds. Well, the problem is I overheated them to start with. So they've gone dormant. Now, will they ever come up under the right circumstances? Yes. I have actually had seeds pop up 6 months later. That was before I knew there was such a thing as temperature dormancy, heat dormancy in lettuce. But when you go to a website, and I'm going to pimp Johnny's a little bit, and it's not because it's necessarily my favorite source of seeds, although we do buy a lot of seeds from them. They specialize in seeds for a lot of small growers, truck farmers, slightly larger farmers. They're not going to deal with, they don't sell any GMO seeds. They're not for the guy who's got, 5,000 acres. He's probably going someplace bigger. But they are handling a lot of small farms. So they have very specific information for every single variety. If I go to their webpage for a specific type of tomato, for instance, here we go, Granadero F1s. Love these things, by the way. They're a type of paste plum Roma tomato. You go to the website, you click on, you type in Granadero tomatoes, or you click on tomatoes and you hit the Granadero button. It will bring you up a page that has those kind of numbers that I just read off about soil temperature and germination rates and stuff like that. It'll tell you what makes that particular seed happiest. In the case of pak choi, I figured out from reading the details that pak choi, okay, it's a brassica, used in a lot of Chinese cooking. Some people like it in salads. We prefer it in soups and stir fry. Super yummy. Very expensive at our grocery store and really pretty crappy at our grocery store. It usually looks like it's been dragged behind a truck to our grocery store. So it's all banged up and wilted and yucky. And I've got some right now in the greenhouse that is just about ready to harvest. But I've spent probably an hour reading all about every variety of pak choi that they sell. Now, why would I do that? Well, I was reading one of the pak chois. It looked great, had just all these attributes that I wanted, and it said, after you transplant this pak choi, you have to have very tight temperature control for at least 10 days. It has to be between, and it gave two numbers, I want to say between 65 and 70 degrees for those 2 weeks. Otherwise, this may bolt. Okay, now bolting means going to seed. That's not what you want. Most plants get bitter and inedible when they start to go to seed. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be something out there that's tougher than that. And the variety of pak choi that we chose, oh, there it is my king choi. And the reason we chose it is it's known for its temperature tolerance. It could be 105 degrees outside. This stuff's doing fine as long as it's got enough water. It can be 20 degrees outside. This stuff's doing fine as long as it's got water. Okay, that's what I want. I don't have the ability to tightly control the temperature in either my greenhouse or my yard. So I knew that for me, I'd be super frustrated if I went off and decided to grow a plant, got the seeds, got them in, got them up, and they're doing awesome, and then I transplant them and all of a sudden they all go to seed. How frustrating is that? So I think personally, if you're seriously trying to grow, I don't mean, there's nothing wrong with just having a little patio garden. There's nothing wrong with just having a few pots where you pop down to the garden center, picked up some plants, and tossed them in there. You'll have a good time. You'll enjoy the plants. But if you're trying to especially start from seed, you really need to know as much as you can.